Okay.
Well, I think we are live. I don't know if Tank is still here or not. He showed up earlier, about 20 minutes ago. Sorry to keep hanging on there. We were having some technical difficulties behind the scenes. And my whole computer just like locked up like a walnut and kicked me out of the thing. It was a whole ordeal. Anyway, it's Wednesday. It's another episode of the Mattriarchy. We are doing an unexpected, unplanned show tonight. We had planned to do a show, but with hurricanes and everything, everybody's plans got mixed up. And I did not realize, Mike, you had some personal stuff going on today.
I had my pacemaker changed this morning.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted
I had surgery this morning. Yeah. It's right there. I got they took out the old one, they put in the new one, so I'm good for another 10 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I guess I did not know you had a pacemaker. So that was
as of 2014, 10 years ago, I had one. So my blood was going at 30 beats a minute, which is not good. It's supposed to be no less than 60. So yeah, I had a pacemaker within an hour after they discovered that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had it replaced today.
Back in my early 20s, right? Back in my early 20s, I walked everywhere. I rode my bicycle all the time. I had a physical job. I did construction. I did stock bending at Walmart. I was always moving, and my resting heart rate was in the high 50s.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was I was exceptionally active.
Yeah.
Back in those days.
Well, I was surprised that I was doing so badly because I'd just done a 5K a few months earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had done a 5K, and then I did it with a heart that was not working right. Basically, the upper and lower ventricles weren't beating at the same rate that they're supposed to. So that's why it's wonky. So, yeah, and I got good doctors this time because they said, did nobody look into why it's not working? They told me it was a genetic abnormality, and I was like, okay. And so we're going to be doing some more testing, which is cool. It's like you got some good doctors, and yeah, they're like, did nobody say why is it doing that?
Because because you and I are older, you know, so one of us older than the other one. We don't need to belabor that, but 2014, you weren't so old that would seem normal.
Right. And that was the first thing I said. Didn't nobody wonder why a 44-year-old guy is having this happen to him? And I'm like, not really. So anyway, I'm healthier now than I was back then. So I've lost almost 50 pounds, and so I'm
yeah, very good. So, hello, Star. Hello, Tank.
I put
today.
Oh, sorry. I was just about to say, I put a message on Facebook that said, it is minor surgery, but it is surgery, and it is the heart. So if this is the last you hear from me, I'm sorry I never got to work for DC Comics. That's my only big regret. A lot of regrets, but that's my only big regret. And my epitaph should be, I now hate everything I once loved. everything I once loved now sucks.
Yep. I saw that just before. I saw that just as I was sending around the link.
I'm going to put that on the shirt.
Well, and our other regulars. I think that Metal is still out there getting set up after his move. But if you guys want to keep the other guys, Cartoonicus and Twitless, in your prayers, they have been in the impact zones. And so just keep them in mind as things go on. I've been following Twitless on Twitter. I haven't reached out to anybody specifically just because I don't want to. I don't know. I sent Twitless a text message saying, I hope you're okay. I'm probably operating in 1989 rules, but I don't want to gum up the phone lines. That was always a thing back in the day, where if there's a big disaster, you just wait for them to call you because the phone lines are always.
I didn't realize they lived in the hurricane impact zone, so I'm sorry about that. I'm joking around here, and
I mean, they're both doing okay. I know that, but at least for now, I don't know. this Milton is supposed to be a factor, and they're not close to where landfall was projected, but they're not far away either.
Yeah.
So it's they're within driving distance. Of course, everywhere in the continental U.S. is within driving distance.
Yeah.
But I could drive there. I don't have the time or money. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Today we are here to talk about, we decided, I can't remember how we got off on it, but Hutch and I were talking about
I know
crossover comics. Okay.
Yeah. I know how he did, because we were talking about Tom King and how awful he is.
Oh,
and
yes.
The one thing that we agreed that he kind of was good at was he did Batman Meets Elmer Fudd. And that was okay.
Yes. Yeah. That was almost really good.
Yeah.
It was like 2/3, 3/4 of a really good story. The Elmer Fudd portion was really solid. I had some questions about how he dealt with Batman, but within the context, it was still an enjoyable piece.
Yeah, I can't believe he writes Batman, or has written so much Batman. Tom King. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I'm amazed that Tom King. It's like Tom King is proof that I could have worked for DC Comics if I just pushed. He has credits, obviously, that he brought with him. That, it's like the I have a background that is interesting, sort of thing. That you don't have to be somebody who has really mastered comic book storytelling if you have a good background.
Well, I don't know the whole story, but I believe he knew a guy who knew a guy, kind of thing. Because his first published credits were before he went to the CIA. And then he did his tours or whatever, and then he came back, and I'm convinced he's a psyop. I absolutely believe that he's part of this legal propaganda against the American people. He's there to crush our spirit.
That would explain a lot.
that would explain so much to me. But
it's kind of that old joke about, if somebody was intentionally trying to destroy something, what would they do any differently from what they're doing now?
Yeah. So here's a Star says Tom King went to comics to demoralize the masculinity sent by the government. I think it's definitely a possibility. I think he also could just be a Gen X kid who grew up without a dad and then got married when he was very young and didn't know what that meant. So, and is still getting his head around that. So
we can deal with that when we talk about Wonder Woman 4-6, which is coming up. Would have been this week, but we put it off because of the lack of people to join us. So
yep, exactly. So,
and as long as we're talking about cartoon crossovers, we wanted to talk about. And I'll look to you. I should load up the screen here. We have the Hong Kong PHOOEY and Black Lightning crossover. Yeah. From, I can't remember what year it was, 2018. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and
there was a whole bunch of Hanna-Barbera crossovers with and I can. This was when they did Adam Strange and Future Quest, Booster
which makes sense.
Stones, Green Lantern and Space Ghost. That sounds actually really good, and I missed that one.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad and the Banana Splits,
which doesn't make a lick of sense.
The Flash and Speed Buggy. The Super Sons meet Dino Mutt and the Blue Falcon.
I have that one. That's really fun. Okay. That was really fun. Yep. That's the one I grabbed off the shelf back then.
And the one that I wish I'd grabbed off the table, Aquaman meets Jabberjaw.
Yeah.
And then there's Deathstroke and Yogi Bear. Green Lantern meets Huckleberry Hound. I don't get that at all. Nightwing, Magilla Gorilla, and Superman and Top Cat, which... I don't know. Maybe some of these are really good because they don't sound like team ups that you'd expect. But anyway, this one I like just because I love both Black Lightning and Hong Kong PHOOEY. But there's also a backup of the Funky Phantom, and to tie it in with DC Comics, they have Jason Blood.
We're gonna have to dissect that one a little bit.
Yeah,
it is. And especially in this season, in where we're at right now, in the history of things, it's so cringy, it's crazy. But so with this one, Top Cat and Booster Gold would have made a lot of sense. I agree, Fizz. I agree.
I can think of some better team ups than what they had, but yeah, that's but there. I think that Aquaman and Jabberjaw sounds really fun too. I wish I'd gotten that one. So
yeah,
there's a few of these others that I hadn't even realized existed, and I would like to have read them. But let's
yeah,
talk about this one.
I do believe they brought some of them in as a what you call on trade of the whole thing too. So with this one here, so what they did is they set this whole story in the alternate cover in 1976, right? So it's this very 1970s Hong Kong action movie kind of thing, and I loved the setting. I gotta say that's the thing is I with these kind of things I always I have not understood this is kind of a thing. I mean, I have not understood why with these properties that Warner Brothers owns, right? Why they haven't done more integration on things that actually make sense, right? Like for example, I can't understand why the Powerpuff Girls aren't part of the main DC universe. I don't get it, right? It could be like Power Pack where they have their little corner. It doesn't necessarily interact with it all there, but you know, you've got your big world events and you've got the girls that show up. That just makes sense to me. I don't understand why you wouldn't do it that way, right? And in line with that sort of thing, this crossover is like a classic like 90s style crossover where they don't explain how these two worlds are colliding. It just exists within this shared universe. And
it is sort of out of continuity for everybody here. Because, I mean, you know, Black Lightning exists now, not in 1976. But, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I think all these stories are out of continuity. And the Professor Presto is actually from an episode of Hong Kong Phooey.
Yes.
But I've never, you know, I watched Hong Kong Phooey as a kid, and yet it's been ages and ages. And the main thing that I know about Hong Kong Phooey is that he is he is sort of like Inspector Gadget in that he is a major screw up, but he is hailed as a success. And
yes.
he screws up, but he screws up in a way that succeeds and defeats the bad guy. But he is like, if you read I actually went back to the Wikipedia and read the summary of Hong Kong Phooey because I had to refresh myself. It's like he's a janitor at the police station who, when he hears that something's happening, he jumps down the laundry chute, bounces off a ironing board into a filing cabinet, emerges in his Hong Kong Phooey outfit, bounces off a mattress and into his car called the Phooey Mobile,
which is amazing.
So well. Yeah.
Which is epic.
Yeah. And none of that. And then he's a goofball. He is a goofball who succeeds despite himself. He's like somebody. He has to read the book on how to do kung fu.
Yeah, the Hong Kong Book of Kung Fu.
Yep. And he wrote, and he's sent away for it. And so he's not really, you know, a guy who's got a sensei and who's, you know. And this is like a completely different character who is a dog who's good at martial arts. And that's it. It's nothing to do except for the names. You know, Penny is like his, or whatever her name is like a character from the cartoon. But
yep. She is the police secretary, in the cartoon. And that's one of the things that I thought was really interesting is they went and they took bits and pieces of these two continuities to make this very, you know, blaxploitation, you know, Hong Kong movie kind of thing, which fits with the origins, the original Tony Isabella origins of Black Lightning, and remembering that Scatman Carruthers was the voice of Hong Kong Phooey,
right?
And so, you know, it's so that's all part of the milieu, the soup that they made this out of. Now, one of the things I think is really interesting from a story perspective, from a continuity perspective, is they are picking the sliver of 70s Hong Kong, of DC 70s martial arts comics, where Bronze Tiger was with the League of Assassins, where he was a villain, right, for a time, until he reunites with Richard Dragon. And so that's kind of in the subtext. You've got Cheshire with the League of Assassins, you've got Bronze Tiger with the League of Assassins, and so you've got this kind of this context where these other pieces of DC history are being accepted as read within the story, if you know the greater context, and fit all that in there. I do think, and I like the idea of, I kind of like the idea of, that there's a dog who's a martial arts master. The idea that he's a legitimate threat and not just a goofball within the context of this story. And I love Hong Kong Phooey as a goofball. I love the Phooey Mobile. So I got to tell a little personal story, me and the Phooey Mobile, right? So when I was first exposed to Hong Kong Phooey in, I want to say probably 84, 85, I was real small. And we had a pull-out couch, one of those it was a sofa bed. A sofa bed, hide a bed. And at the time, my dad's an accountant, and he worked for a couple of huge accounting firms at different times down in Tulsa where we lived. And so they would send him off to do audits at other branches, and so he'd be gone for like a week at a time. And I was never a good sleeper as a child, and I would know when Dad was supposed to be getting back, but sometimes he'd get back super late or whatever, and I always would want to see him when he got there. So I started the habit of sneaking out when my mom was in bed already, and half unfolding the hide-a-bed and propping the cushions up and pretending that it was the Phooey Mobile until I passed out waiting for my dad. And that would happen. And then I would and this was I was 5 or 6, right? And so then eventually that happened several times, and my parents would kind of be like, Matthew, what are you doing? And I would be just not wanting to explain that I was pretending it was the Phooey Mobile, because then I would have to because my parents weren't keen. Mm-hmm. Keen isn't the right word, but they weren't keyed into Hong Kong Phooey. It was just another cartoon. They hadn't I hadn't explained all that, so I'd have to try to explain what Hong Kong Phooey was. And so I just sort of hummed and hawed about it. And eventually my dad was just like, okay, you need to stop that. You're making a mess and it's a hassle. So just don't do that anymore. So I have this deep emotional connection to the Hong Kong Phooey character. And seeing him in this story, they take this very mystical, kung fu movie take to the character, and I appreciate seeing him as a legit hero figure, even though that's a drastic, almost violent departure from how he's portrayed in the cartoon. Because I have this long-seated appreciation for the character. So anyway, and I think it suits well for this something sort of like a seriousness within the thing. So,
do you think Scatman Crothers sang the theme song?
I think so. I believe so.
Okay, because I didn't know who Scatman Crothers was, of course, back when I watched the cartoon. But,
oh yeah, I didn't either. Yeah. I didn't either. In fact, I discovered who he was after I saw The Shining, and I was like, that guy sounds like Hong Kong Phooey. What the heck?
Sometimes you really can, with a voiceover artist, it's like bam, you recognize him right away. When I saw Empire Strikes Back, I heard Yoda say, "You feel like what?" And I said, "Mom, that's Grover." Before another line was said, I was like, "That's Grover."
That's amazing. And Miss Piggy.
And Miss Piggy, yes. But he didn't sound like Miss Piggy. Okay, so the creators here, look at this. This is Denise Cohen from who did stuff in the 70s and 80s, and so and Bill Sienkiewicz is the inks. I mean, that's a pretty good powerhouse.
Oh yeah,
that you got here. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised at who they managed to get.
And Brian Hill, who did I believe, if I remember names right, did a really good run on Outsiders about the same time too. So, some really solid created teams. And this this thing. Look at this. This is crazy. So you've got this idea of Hong Kong Phooey as a Vietnam vet, right? Having been over in the Nam, and Pierce, of course, I think is Jefferson Pierce knows him from some sort of similar action, right? But he's just a straight on dog, and
I don't think Pierce was ever a vet. He was in the Olympics.
Okay.
It would actually be funny if he'd been in the Laugh Olympics.
Oh, that's funny.
From the Laugh Olympics.
That'd be great. But yeah, also, I love the car.
Yeah, it's not quite the Phooey mobile.
It is not quite the Phooey mobile, but I'd still love that car.
Yeah.
So, premise of the story is that there is a secret fighting technique that an ancient master, wushu master, learned from a demon called the Way of the God Fist. And then this magician character, who is a foe of Hong Kong Phooey's, has a desire to learn this secret from these hidden scrolls, to kill the world, to murder the world. But I really enjoy, and it's just the martial arts, just a fight, just a whole big knockdown, drag out.
And I like that bit of dialogue that you went past where she says, "I'm not going to hold back," and they said, "We appreciate that you don't." It's like,
oh yeah. That's a great.
We'd be disappointed if you did. Yeah,
that is a great line. I'll go back to it here. Right here. Are you testing me, little Rosemary? I suppose I am. 2 against 1. Forgive me if I don't hold back. We'd be disappointed if you did. That is some great bants.
Yeah. And of course, she's not traditionally. She's not a martial artist, but in this version, she is. That's okay.
Yeah, because that's once again we're reinterpreting the whole milieu. I mean, the whole concept of Hong Kong Phooey through this, 70s martial arts movie, Hong Kong movie, the kung fu movie paradigm, right? And it's actually really fun too because Jefferson Pierce, who is not a martial artist and is not has any interest in like the mysticism around kung fu, is nonetheless along for the ride, and so Black Lightning gets to be the proxy for the audience as they go through and explain this sort of stuff, and then the lore that the thing's built into. So that's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. So hang on a second here.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, my allergies are kicking my butt here. So.
Oh, no problem. No problem. If you need me to fill time,
well, if I do that again, just know that that's what's going on. Is I'm looking for some nasal relief or something. To be super gross sounding about it. Hey, audience, are you sick yet?
Are there any good comments? Actually, nobody said anything in a while.
And I'm not sure if it's
Fizz Chozo's corner. That comment's been up for. Yep. Nobody said anything in 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh!
What happened? Well, is our chat still working?
Maybe the connection went bad with all the internet stuff. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't have Starlink, so who knows? So
okay. So
I want to move.
Are we going to show the whole story, or just
no? I don't want to show the whole story. I just want to go through some highlights on there.
Right. And that kind of gets across the point that basically they're chasing down this thing. They go see a sensei who has the scroll.
Yeah, an apothecary.
Yeah. But he's obviously filling the role of the old sensei,
I feel called out.
Oh man, that's a burn.
It hurts, man. It hurts.
Yeah.
So, anyway, long story short, they have the great big fight scene, and I just wanted to to where was it? There was some visuals I wanted a key to.
I just want to say that how, without giving anything away, how Hong Kong PHOOEY actually defeats the guy is brilliant. It's unexpected.
Well, yeah.
It was very smart writing.
Well, yeah, and it is. The twist at the end is, here's the page I was looking for. Let me get my screen back. Sorry, I've got stuff set up so toggling is awkward for me. Sorry. I set up the stream stupid, everybody. It's my fault.
So
here we've got the magician Presto. He's reading through the incantation and he says, teach me how to murder the world. It's amazing. So the long and the short of it is that Hong Kong PHOOEY is he's prepared to really have a big knockdown drag out, and they pull it off. And you have this great stuff, great action where Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning fights off Cheshire and the Bronze Tiger, and then this super powered Presto. Now, and here's one of the things about this, right, guys? So if you guys saw the end of Blade, right, and the monster that Stephen Dorff becomes always seems like a little silly, but it's gives you that end of the Hong Kong kung fu movie fight, right? It's this big martial arts fight between the two main characters, and there's been all this tension for the whole movie. This does that kind of thing, and I really enjoyed it. We won't spoil the ending on it, but I really enjoyed it. So, but yeah, so this was an example of taking how do you do a crossover with things that don't necessarily fit 100% perfect, and how do we shake that out there? So let me see, can I do that? Okay, sweet.
Some of the artwork is kind of crude in places, but
well, and I mean, part of that I think is stylistic, because that's Sienkiewicz's whole thing. Like, he inks it, so he uses these huge, heavy black lines. And I think that really gives it like a lot of this evocative, mysterious,
this very scratchy style.
Yeah, and it makes it feel low budget, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can't believe I'm forgetting the guy's name. Who did Black Belt Jones?
I don't know that one. Sorry.
It's a the guy was a martial arts actor who was in Enter the Dragon, and he did a whole series of blaxploitation kung fu movies, and I can't remember the cat's name right now. Oh man, I'm so stupid.
But it is more stylistic.
But they were like super low budget blaxploitation kung fu movies, and so this guy's, the way the art is used in the story gives it that same kind of feel. Kelly, yes, that's right.
But this writer, I have to say, this is a good comic book writer. I like this story. I think he does a very good job of laying out, of telling the story in a concise way. I mean, you've got a very good story in one little special here, and this is a one shot, but it is part of it was like an event where they for a month, 2 months, they had all these crossovers between. And
I believe there were 8 one shots that were part of this event.
Let me read it.
DC had done DC meets Hanna-Barbera, DC meets Looney Tunes.
Yeah,
and
there's 12.
Yeah, there's 12 of them. Okay. And so there's been DC Universe meets one of the other properties they have too. I can't remember, Cartoon Network maybe. Yeah. And so that's that. So this particular story, it's done in one. It's the whole business. So, which now we're gonna go ahead and leave Hong Kong PHOOEY and Black Lightning away.
It won't let me post the URL in your chat. That must be prohibited.
Well, yeah, because
yeah, keep people from doing it. Okay, I'll send it to you in the private chat. But that's the URL for the DC meets Hanna-Barbera. Okay. There are 12 of them. Yeah, so that was a pretty substantial crossover bit.
Peace. Scooby-Doo. This was done at the same time they were doing the Scooby Apocalypse series.
Yeah.
And Mark Russell's
and the wacky races set in the future or in an apocalyptic future or something.
And there was the Mark Russell had that Snagglepuss miniseries where Snagglepuss was Cole Porter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know, was any of that any good? I don't know. They also did a Flintstones thing where they're realistic looking and
yeah. I did not read the Mark Russell series. It just didn't even seem appealing to me because it was taking itself very seriously for a story about a pink cougar who wants to be a failed actor. And they were trying to make a serious commentary about sexual politics in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And I just or 20s, and I was just like, yeah, I don't know that I'm that interested in the topic. So
yeah.
So now we're going full circle to the backup. And one of the things about each of these series in this thing had a backup feature. And in this one, the backup was Funky Phantom, which, if you guys don't know, the Funky Phantom is a short run 1970s, late 60s, early 70s Hanna-Barbera series that was the Scooby-Doo formula, right? So Ruby and Spears invented Scooby-Doo, and then Hanna-Barbera said, well, that's great, and they just did it forever. It was Jabberjaw was that formula. The Funky Phantom was that formula. Speed Buggy was that formula. Ton of their things were the Scooby-Doo, and they would replace the dog with something else. The dog with a cat, the dog with, whatever. And Funky Phantom was a ghost, a Revolutionary War era ghost who was both the Shaggy character and the Scooby character.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how Funky Phantom was. No, so in this story, we have a situation where we're going to see the death of the Funky Phantom, where he's injured, he's hurt himself, he's overpacked his gun, he's trying to hide from the British, and he ends up dying in a clock. And so there is his corpse, and the DC as directed by, and this is Scott Collins, the art in this piece. And I tell you, man, that's so sad.
Yeah.
I guess they paid him, so that's nice.
Yeah. And Jeff Parker's the writer. And
I'm not familiar with Parker's work. I can't comment on that, but here's we are going to probably spoil this one here. So the premise is that this local senator, the state senator, in wherever they're at, somewhere in the colonies, right, the New England or whatever.
I believe he's actually a senator for the U.S.
A U.S. senator.
U.S. senator, yeah, because he changes. Yeah, I'm spoiling the ending.
Yeah.
I'm going to,
Well, and so they've brought hire Jason Blood to resurrect this guy because there's been stories about his ghost haunting the mansion where he died, and there's bodies there. And long story short, the Funky Phantom comes out, and the first thing I noticed is that he does not have a mustache, because the original Funky Phantom had this ridiculous feathery mustache that he would wear that looked like whiskers. But that was such a unique part of his design that it doesn't even really look like the Funky Phantom.
Yeah.
So they brought him up because they want to get, since he fought and died in the Revolutionary War, they want to get his opinion on the Second Amendment.
Right? Yeah, and they didn't he died before the Constitution was written, so he has no opinion.
So they bring out, right. So then they're like, oh, let's bring the guy a Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. And here's what they bring as the Constitution. Now, Mike, you've read the Constitution. You're interested in the politics. Does that or does that not look like 14 constitutions?
It does.
It's a huge stack of paper.
Yeah.
So the first thing I said, I started laughing out loud at the story, because I said to myself, we have a story that is written by somebody who doesn't know anything about the Constitution. In fact, if I had thought about this ahead of time, I've got a pocket Constitution that is about 3 by 5 and about
Right.
this big that is sitting on a shelf right there.
Yeah.
So somebody, and then he goes through and he's reading the thing and he's going through little bits of it. And there are quotes from the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that are in here. And hey, Fly Fox, how's it going?
I love that they're in the third hour of reading the Constitution because he has commentary on every part of it. He does anecdotes and
and it would be impossible to spend 3 hours reading the Constitution. I mean, you'd have to not be reading it. You'd just be like, it'd be like us. Like if we decided to read the Constitution on a show and we turn it into like a 3-hour live stream, right?
I do have to say, if you've got commentary on every part of it, and he has anecdotes about everything. So that's probably why it's taking so long. And that's what they're joking about, is that he comments on everything. And and then he finally gets to the Second Amendment, and
which once again,
he just said, "Oh, good part, free speech and free press and freedom of religion and all that." And he just, "Oh, that's a good part." He didn't. And that's all he had to say on the First Amendment. And so,
and then so they leave out the right to address your petition your government for grievances, the right to assemble, right? So once again, with the writer, seems like they took the time to read or they had, this is before this existed, but it's like they had their AI summarize the Constitution so they could take notes and stick it on there.
I mean, as soon as this opens, this is an agenda written story, and that's the problem.
It's one of these things too. Like I said, the person who wrote the story, I quote mined sections of the document so that they could go ahead and make some sort of statement about it. But it's clear that they don't actually are comfortable and familiar with the document in itself. So of course they're going to miss the context of the document. Yeah. So here we go. Here, they're saying, well, what's the problem with it? La da 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 da, and they have this guy who brings out this. Well, I should be able to walk in public with the ordinance I would have carried in the army if I'd served. Right? Yeah. Oh, okay. So that sounds like a real loaded statement, since that's not what this is about. And I like those. Like Scott Collins is a very competent writer, but like this here is not a competently rendered. I mean, he's a competent artist, but this is not a competently rendered weapon, right?
It's floating in his hands for some reason. He's not
floating in his hands right here. And then it says, "What is this contraption?" It's an AR-15. Okay, kind of looks like an AR. I'll give you that. With a 100-round magazine. No. There's no way 100 223 shots are going to fit inside of this Elkhorn magazine. That's not correct. And a bump stock for automatic firing. Once again, no. That's not what a bump stock is for.
Right. You can get it, and for those who don't know, a bump stock basically bounces the gun back against the trigger, because it's still a semi-automatic, and that you get one shot for every time you pull the trigger.
Right.
But in the action of moving the gun back and forth, you can get a rapid fire from it.
Yeah. And you can do that, and you can do that without a bump stock, because the kickback, the kickback is what the kickback is. So that's something that can be done without using any kind of additional
but as
thing.
We see, he isn't even holding it the right way for it to have that effect as it goes off like an automatic.
Yeah.
And not here, but when the next time you see him firing.
Right. Yeah. And we roll up here, and here it is here, and it's going off, and he's like, fingers not on the trigger, the whole thing. And I will say that, like, one of the things that we so often see in modern comics when they've got bullets flying off, that you actually we'll see the whole bullet. They'll just draw the whole bullet, like they trace one and then copy paste. Yeah. And here they actually do look like spent brass. So I will give them credit for that. But this is one of my bugaboos about this kind of stuff. It's so light. Because it's floating. It's floating. Yeah, that's right. But they're an AR-15 uses a 223 bullet, which is barely larger than a 22.
Yeah,
it's just barely large. Now they've got more powder. It's a little bigger bullet. It's not a 22. But it is barely larger than a 22.
The thing about an AR-15 though is it looks like a rifle. It is a rifle.
It is a rifle.
I mean, he would recognize it as, oh, that's a gun. I mean, like, what is that thing? It's like, and he wouldn't necessarily, the Funky Phantom I'm talking about, wouldn't necessarily know about it, but they had automatic weapons at that time that they were experimenting with.
Yep.
They had much more than muskets. People who say, oh, well, the only muskets existed, so that's all you get. All you get is the barrel thing. No, that's what they could mass produce for the Army at the time. There was other stuff that existed. And obviously when they wrote the Second Amendment, it's not like they wrote it like they never thought that guns would get any better than they did that year,
Yep.
It's just,
absolutely.
Well, but I'm arguing in advance. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's fine. And the thing is, like, you look at the target, an AR-15 would be hard pressed to do that to a target.
Yeah.
It's not. It's
just a very good rifle. That's all it is.
Well, and even and there are people that like don't even think they're that good. They're just popular because they're modular and you can take them apart and clean them really easily. And they don't have get composite frames, so you don't have to worry about the upkeep on the wood. So some people prefer the composite body to the wood body a lot of other rifles use.
Yeah. Why is Donald Trump alive? Because the guy used an AR-15 at a great distance. It's not the best.
That's part of it.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's just an AR-15 is a very good rifle. That's all it is, and it's custom. It's popular because it's customizable and because it has a lot of options and a lot of things like that. But it's not the best gun in the world. Yeah. No,
it's just one. And so here's the thing: here's the question. But you already have a regulated militia because you've got a standing army. That's not what a militia is.
Right.
Because obviously, if you've read the Second Amendment, it's because a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of rights, right? The idea that the militia must exist to keep the government at bay. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and when they this whole next panel is just badly argued.
Yep.
It's straw man stuff.
Yeah, straw man. Right.
We might need to stand against them. You just said they're the most powerful, and it's like, but
the Afghanis sure didn't seem to have much of a problem. With that, of course, that has more to do with the people running things and the soldiers themselves.
But this is the old we have tanks and atomic bombs, so
exactly. So then the other thing is, they're for hunting. Well, is there anything left of the animal? Right? That's first of all, yes, because this is a false equivalency, but AR-15s don't do this to animals.
Right.
It's kind of a tiny bullet. So it's 223. So
Flyfox Pro is asking, what is this comic? This is Black Lightning meets Hong Kong PHOOEY, and this is the backup story with the Funky Phantom that we're doing here.
Right. And then it says, so then somebody says, home invasions, is that a big problem? Yes.
Yes, it is.
It is a big problem. And I did not look the stats up for the show, but it was that in 2018, I believe this number came out. It was I think it was actually it was an agency you wouldn't expect. Wasn't the FBI, but I think it was like I can't remember. There was an agency that was talking about a federal agency that did a study on defensive use of firearms. Even without being fired, and it was somewhere between like 750 and 3 or 2,000 instances of violent attacks that are stopped because somebody else is armed without necessarily bullets being fired, and it has to do with the way those things are or are not reported.
Right.
And that was a whole thing. That's why there's such a big number on it.
John Lott's big more guns, less crime argument.
Yeah.
That's far. The incidents of violence are far outweighed by the times that they save people, and But the when seconds count, cops are minutes away.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It's just Now this is the bad page.
Here we go. I got
a
a couple of comments here. Oh, actually, Isaac points out, the pepper box revolver, definitely the pickle gun.
Yep.
Yeah. So it says it was written with a bias. Was this written for bias pro or con gun, or was this a clever way to push a viewpoint? It was definitely written as an anti-gun bias. Hard Tank points out you are the militia. This is correct.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was Adams who said, with the exception of a few public officers, the entirety of the people are the militia.
Yeah. I think this story was written because it was like, oh, I've always wanted to do if the founding fathers were alive today and saw the Second Amendment, and the Funky Phantom gives me a chance to do that.
Yeah. And this would have been released. This released in 2018, so it was probably written in the wake of the Las Vegas shooting, when this was that was a lot of question about that.
Guess it was about
but time, one of the things that we still don't have answers about that. So, like, taking an outlier case like that to try to say anything about it doesn't really explain what's going on at all. Hey, Metal. Their guns in 1776 caused way more tissue damage than modern firearms. This is 100% true. 100% true. So, this page, which is the dumbest page. So we have a situation where, oh my gosh, sorry everybody. Oh, itches.
Oh, his nose is gone.
Oh, my eyes are about. Wow,
you're much redder than you were a second ago.
So here we've got a situation where the round is jammed, and this guy he accidentally pulls the trigger somehow with his pinky.
Yeah.
Trying to clear a jammed round.
But it goes off twice.
Yeah. Which isn't how guns work.
Yeah.
And then
Speaking of
this
which,
guy accidentally just holds the trigger down, and it just goes crazy.
Yeah, which is not how semi-automatic works.
That's not how it's
and it's works. Bad trigger discipline. He would be a bad gun owner if he's ever, carrying it with his finger in the trigger chamber.
Well,
People who don't use guns don't understand that. You never have your finger there unless you are firing.
And the funny thing about this is, you look at this page and all this bad trigger discipline going on here. But earlier in the story, when they're having it, there's no finger on the trigger. The guns the guns don't even seem to be like real objects.
Right.
Like the Phantom seems more real than the gun on this page. And so then down here,
do you think that Collins didn't have one, and he's like, I will draw it in later?
It's possible. It's possible. Or maybe he wasn't told what the gun would be.
Yeah.
And so then he has like an intern come in and put it in later. And so then, okay, so we flash over, we're having all this other kind of stuff, and everybody's traumatized, and it's all,
the
oh my God.
Changed color. There was a black and white flag, not a red, white, and blue flag.
Oh, was it earlier?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
that's
can
funny.
Back up. It's funny. It's changed color.
I gotta see.
Yeah. Well, there it's red, white, and blue, but the first opening panel, when you see it, it's, they didn't really color it in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's super inconsistent. I mean, there is a little bit of red there too, but it's just,
I suppose.
Yeah, it's super inconsistent with how it was. Yeah. So anyway, so there's this big thing, and so it ends with the Funky Phantom giving safety lessons on muskets here,
because they're the only guns that are permitted now.
Yeah, which is great. So this is a big snooze, man. It's so crazy because I really enjoyed. So in this book, I didn't even spoil the ending of the Hong Kong Phooey one. I so enjoyed the Hong Kong Phooey story, and then this is so bad. I was just like, listen, I
was mad about it, and then I'm like, it doesn't even make a good enough argument to be worth bothering about. It's such a bad story.
It's literally like your wine aunt complaining about you going to the gun range on Saturday afternoon. That's the level of story going on here.
Yeah.
Parker, come on, man. I don't even know you, but I gotta believe you're better than this.
Jeff Parker's the guy who wrote Bone. And
that's Jeff Smith.
Jeff Smith. Oh, okay. I got Jeff Parker and Jeff Smith mixed up. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Jeff Smith. Jeff Parker is who then? I'm sorry. I'm so goofed up. I'm sorry, Jeff Smith. Well, I feel bad. Now I really owe Jeff Smith an apology because I've been blaming him for this awful story all these years.
Okay, so here we go. That's hilarious. So Nanji showed up. Hello, Nanji. I'm an hour late. Well, I didn't advertise anywhere. It was all this today was entirely bad for me. So stop everything you're doing and explain everything you talked about from the beginning. I will not be doing that. Thanks for the sneeze blessings and all that kind of stuff. Hey, Isaac says this feels like those comics they gave us as kids, the anti-drugs. Yes. Well, okay. So when it comes to propaganda comics, I don't necessarily dislike them, right? Like Batman Seduction of the Gun was like kind of ham-fisted, but at least it had like some fun detective work that was in it. So I didn't hate it, right? But it was so one of the things where like, okay, I could kind of let it go. And yes, you know, it's definitely a situation where people have gotten hurt from guns and there's carelessness and there's street violence and all that other kind of stuff. So you're talking about some real stuff, and it's a little preachy, but at least there's some fun Batman action and a little bit of detective work in it. I kind of like it. Okay. But this one, it's like, you know, honestly, Isaac, it's not even like the anti-drug comics. Like if you were reading DC Comics in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there would be informational things about like HIV safety. That would be like, you know, 1 or 2 pages that they tuck in there about the dangers of you know, like you can't contract AIDS from a water fountain kind of stuff.
Right.
That was like super like ham-fisted. And it's just like, yes, I go to health class. Thank you. It was like 5 years later that anyone needed to know this anymore.
Yeah.
but darn it, if Green Lantern isn't telling me that to not have random hookups with people in the parking lot. Thank you, Green Lantern.
Actually, they never say that. They just say, you know, you can't get AIDS from touching somebody. You can't get AIDS from drinking their water. It's like, and then they say, go here to read more. You know, go to this number or call this phone number. Yeah, I remember those 1-page ads. But yeah, I just looked up Jeff Parker, and I'm like, what is he known for? He's not known for much of anything. He did the Future Quest, which was Johnny Quest and all the other adventure stuff right around this time.
Okay.
And he's done a lot of stuff, nothing really notable. I mean, he's done like X-Men First Class and things like that, but I don't know. Nothing jumps out as like he is well known for this, you know. It's like bam.
He is well known for picking up the phone when they have, you know, need something done now.
Maybe, I don't know.
Which is fine. I mean, hey, my name isn't in a DC comic, you know.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Yeah.
Although my name is in a couple of Antarctic books, so it's pretty fun.
There you go.
Yeah, as an editor. Okay. Anyway, Metal says this is great. To some people, guns may as well be fairy tale monsters that they could possibly run into in the modern day. Yes.
Oh man, we could do a whole series on propaganda comics, but
yeah,
the Superman for Earth. Do you remember that way back when? It was like an Earth. No. It was an Earth Day comic way back when. It was Superman for Earth. I want to say maybe Dan Jurgens did it. I don't remember who did it. But
no, I think I do remember. I've never read it, but I think I remember seeing ads in it.
It was an interesting book because it was done at the time that Clark Kent and Lois Lane were engaged but not yet married, and they actually talk about how they probably can't have kids, so maybe they should consider adopting. And it was like, that's an interesting conversation to have in here, and talking about, because it's, that whole let's not fill the earth with more people type thing. But at the same time, it is an interesting it's like, they never talk about that outside of this comic book, but their inability to breed, which should be the case, but it isn't, because they're just, oh sure, the Kryptonian and the Earth Woman just had a kid. It's like, well, how? He doesn't even have Earth DNA.
No, it's simple. It's simple. See, because there's only one way things work. So if they're gonna have humanoid life out there in the stars, they're still gonna be similar.
but
thumbs,
anyway,
hands. There's only one way that the universe works.
Yeah. But the reason I bring it up is that was a book clearly written with a, environmental agenda, but it was interesting because Superman shows up in Brazil and there's people protesting the cutting down of the rainforest, and the Brazilians are like, yeah, this is our resources. We have resources. We need to use our resources. You're just telling us, no, leave that all alone. What are we supposed to do? And I'm like, that's a good argument. It's a fair argument, which I was not expecting in a book which is, you think, is so heavy on one agenda. And it's like, there's arguments to be made, and it was an intelligent book, and I was not expecting that. And so that was, there's stuff like that throughout that book where it's like, yeah, there's arguments why we don't do this, why we don't do that, and why it's hard to go to this. It's like, I was expecting worse from it. And that's a good way to do a case. I would not mind a comic book about guns. And it's like Chuck Dixon was talking about when they said, we want you to do a landmine comic. And he's like, I like landmines. Landmines are a cheap way to secure an area. Cheap landmines are, he starts making the case for landmines. They're like, no, children blow up from landmines. He's like, well, not the good kind. The American kind, we make them, they expire after a certain amount of time. You can actually deactivate them by computer nowadays. There's, he's like, no, we want you to do an anti-landmine comic book. He's like, well, I don't think I'm your guy.
Let me get out my Rolodex and find you somebody who can do that for you.
Yeah, Denny O'Neil did it for him. So
well, that seems appropriate.
Yeah, and they said, they asked Graham, and Graham's like, no, actually landmines are, and they're like, oh, okay, shut up. I need an anti-landmine guy to write this. And it's like, why couldn't you do a smart anti-landmine book that talks about that? It's like, the problem is these cheap landmines made by some manufacturers that are colorful, that attract kids, the way they leave them behind. And, but they wanted an anti-landmine hatred for 22 pages, and that's it, and not a smart look at it. And it's like, okay.
Well, and the thing that gets me about that is, like, I remember growing up, like, in the 80s and seeing old TV shows, and they'd have, even in comedy shows, there'd be situations where somebody would run into an old, like, sea mine.
Yeah.
And it would be just like, and everyone was
Gilligan's Island did that.
Gilligan's Island did that. There was several Disney movies that was the yellow, what was that thing? Anyway, there's a bunch of things where, like, that was a thing, and it was like, it was one part like gag or one part like story element, like depending whether it's a comedy story or whether it's like a drama.
It's like, oh no, it's even in Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
Remember they find one? It's like, it doesn't work anymore. It's just this big floating sea mine sitting in his farmhouse.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where, like, you had those elements that were part of it, but it's still, it's still, it's educational, but it's also informative in the thing. And it's like one of these things where, we were talking about it, and the idea that the story can be there to, like, have different characters have the different perspectives on the danger, and then actually go through and have that conversation as part of the story, and not just like just preaching one way of looking at the world. And you know, I mean, of course, you don't necessarily want to get a comic and get a treatise discussion of it all, but you know, like this thing, and it's an 8-page mini, right? But I would say if I had the chance to write a Funky Phantom comic, I would not spend 8 pages, you know, talking about the Second Amendment. I would probably spend 8 pages having Muddy and the gang, you know, find a hidden treasure underneath like a caboose in some city park. That just seems like
there's some humor in the fact that they bring this guy back to talk about the Constitution, and he's from a time he died before it was written. He doesn't know anything about it. It'd be funny to have that aspect of they brought back. It's like so interesting to talk to a guy from that time period, and he's like he doesn't really know much.
He's 11 years too early,
right? And it's interesting for that, but the gun stuff is just terrible and terribly done. Did you ever read that Landmine comic that Batman?
No, I haven't.
I've read it. It was just, you know, they make these things they're colorful and they attract children and they're terrible and this was like I think Jeanette Kahn was like tied in with the whole Princess Diana's anti-landmine thing. So that's why she wanted this. And Batman saves this girl. And on the second to last panel, she sees a landmine, goes, oh, colorful, and reaches for it. And she blows up on the last panel. It's just, that's the book that they wanted. They didn't want to, you know, actually landmines can be useful. No. So there's just, you know, some people just want a rant and no argument and nothing but what do you call them, straw man? You know, the straw man here is the Hicks. You know, the very obvious Hicks holding the guns. You know.
Yeah, for sure.
Who can't make a solid argument? You know. And,
Fly brings up according to Bruce, Joe Chill used a .45 automatic. Well, and the one thing about that is like that was the same way that the dual 45s the Shadow used were referred to as automatics too. But I never got the impression they were supposed to be fully auto either. So I don't know if it was. I had always assumed it was just an older way of referring to a semi-automatic weapon back when most guns were not semi-automatic, right? When the 9/11 or 1911 came out, my brain is scattering. I may be getting the name of the gun wrong, because my brain is not working right now. But yeah, when those automatic pistols or semi-automatic pistols became were becoming more common, you could still legally purchase a Thompson. So I don't know if that was a situation where that was just a common parlance for the time, where they didn't differentiate semi-auto from fully auto just in the vernacular, because it wasn't like because you could just go down to the store and buy a machine gun if you had enough money.
Yeah, and having, you know, the Revolutionary War times when this was written, when the Second Amendment was written, it's like at the time people had private cannons. They actually the Navy actually had to go to private people and say, could we borrow your cannon? We need to go to war. And they had to borrow private cannons to go fight the pirates and Barbary pirates and things like that. They had to borrow cannons. It's cannons. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite quotes of George Washington, looking at all that, because the Barbary Wars kicked off before they really kicked off, right? But during his, I think it was a second presidency, second term, there was a lot of incursions with the pirates, and George Washington said, "I would to God that we had a navy that I might blow them out of the water," because they didn't have a standing navy, and that was one of the things that came on later on. So
yeah, Fly Fox Pro has a lot of good comments here.
Not in the 90s. Yeah, that's right. And it could have just been an affectation to an older mentioning of that. But yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about the line from The Seduction of the Gun, which John
Yep.
Ostrander, who is not a regular Batman writer, but he was brought in because all the regular Batman writers knew too much about guns to make convincing anti-gun arguments. Even though Chuck Dixon has said, hey, Bruce hates guns, and I don't change that because I like guns. He says that's what although he did make Alfred like guns.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's that I can't remember I think it was the second big arc with Gunhawk where Batman's there's two dueling snipers, and in order to stop the fight, Batman's gotta take out, because their sniper posts are so far apart, their vantage points are so far apart that Batman can only get to one of them. And so he ends up taking out one of the snipers with martial arts and tying him up, and then using the gun to take out the other position. And I can't remember what that was in tech, but I can't remember what the issue was at all. But it was, I think it was the second one with Gunhawk.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun story, because it was one of those things where, Batman's really upset because there's these professional snipers going around shooting people, and he's just like, I hate guns. Guns are terrible. But yet the only way to do it is to go back on his training of having studied these things so he'd know how they worked.
Yeah.
And actually applying a set of skills that he hadn't used in however long.
That was one of the interesting things, was he wrote that Nightwing run where Nightwing became a cop. And of course, if you're going to become a cop, you got to use a gun. And Dick Grayson's not good with guns. And they just mentioned, aside from your terrible job on the range, you're a pretty good cop. But I remember way back when, in the 70s, there was a character called the Spook, who was dressed like, a ghost. The term that, unfortunately has some racial connotations too, so they don't use the Spook much, and they killed him off. That's who Damian Wayne killed, actually, now that I think of it. Anyway, the Spook actually has Batman trapped, and says and has a gun in the room, and he says the only way to get out of here is to use a gun, and we all know Batman won't use a gun. And I'm like, we all know that? Did all the Batman criminals know that he won't use a gun? Like, he hates guns that much? And Batman gets out of by taking the gun and throwing it and destroying something. I can't remember enough about the story. I remember relating that to Chuck, and Chuck's like, oh, that's stupid. He wouldn't hate guns that much that he wouldn't, like, he will not fire one, to use one to
well, no, yeah.
It's like, he just does not like guns. And yeah.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I grew up not really liking guns. And this is actually, Najee says, do I have to turn my right winger card if I admit that I actually know nothing about guns? No. I grew up not really and I don't own any, because they're super expensive and I don't have that kind of money.
I didn't fire one until I was 36.
Yeah. But I grew up not really being exposed to guns. And but I understand that, like, I understand people not, enjoying that as an activity or anything. But to think that Batman would, by his personal aversion, I think it would be, I think it's stupid. I think it's stupid that Batman wouldn't, touch a gun, wouldn't fire a gun. That idea, that doesn't even make any sense. I think it makes more sense that Batman would have a pathological aversion to killing, and like that's his real, like, Achilles heel was not killing.
Yeah.
And I think even that would make more sense than him not, like, having some sort of aversion to firearms.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as was pointed out in the comments here, the movies always have Batman put guns on his machines. And it's like, well, he won't use a pistol, but he'll put a rapid fire, just
anti-aircraft
huge machine guns on his Batmobile or on his, Batwing. And I don't like that either. I even though all you ever see him use it for is to blast out walls, I still don't like it. Why would he even have that? It's just, that's like Nolan and before him, Burton, just they don't really know Batman. They just look at him as kind of like he's a caped James Bond, basically. and
I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah. And that's the problem is then when you try to make an argument that Batman doesn't kill, like, oh, he did in this movie, and like, yeah, that's what we don't like about it because he doesn't kill. And it's like, but he did in the movie. So when you try to say Batman doesn't kill, they're like, he did in the movie, so you're wrong. And it's like, well, no, we're saying they're wrong. They got that. Well, wrong.
and it's like one of the things that I dislike about some of that stuff too is like it's not that Batman wouldn't kill, like incidentally, right? Like. At the end of Batman Begins, where like he just like I'm not going to kill you, but I have to save you.
Yeah.
Like yeah, that's a pretty Batman thing to do, right? But the fact that like that Batman's running around in this like tank and driving over other people's cars willy nilly like it's nothing. That's not a very Batman thing to do.
Yeah.
And as much as I love Batman '89. Like the whole scene with them, like the missiles going downtown and blowing up private property, and nah, that's not really
blowing up excess chemicals full of people. It's he sets off a bomb, and the Batmobile is completely surrounded by guys with guns. When the bomb goes off, they're all dead. It's like that's not really Batman style, but you can't. You try telling people that, and they're like, look. Batman killed people, so
I just watched it happen.
Yeah, and it's you've read you've read the what is it, Vengeance of Bane, the first appearance of Bane.
Yeah,
and at the end, Batman is like trying to save, like he's fighting some criminals. One of them is like falling off the edge of a building, and Batman grabs him and is holding him, and Bane has been observing this whole time. He says, "You don't kill. You're this terrible, monster of the night that everybody's afraid of, and you won't break the sixth commandment." That's just, and it's a great line, and that's the first thing he says to Batman when he first reveals himself. It's like, you don't kill, and it's like he's found something that he can use against him, that he'll even put himself at great risk to try to save this guy who, it's like, for crying out loud, you don't want him. He's a criminal. Let him fall to his death. As far as Bane is concerned, that's like that doesn't make any sense to him. So and that is, it's an important part of Batman's character. As far as hating guns, I understand his hatred of guns. Because he's constantly reliving the night that, this guy, and I have no problem with John Ostrander's point in Seduction of the Gun saying, the guy who killed my parents, Joe Chill, could not have done this if he didn't have a gun. It's not that he couldn't have used something else, like he couldn't have used a knife or something, but if he'd had a knife, Batman could kind of see in his eyes that he just wanted to steal. The gun was kind of like, there was an altercation. He wasn't planning on murdering his parents either. It's just they start grappling and blam blam, and both the parents are dead, and he's like, "Stop looking at me, kid, run off." He can kind of judge his character. It's like, he didn't kill Bruce. He wasn't just a psychotic, I'm going to kill everybody type character. Right. That's what he's saying, is that he had a gun, and it's because guns make it so easy to kill, And I've always liked the subtle message in the Lone Ranger that he uses silver bullets to remind himself that life is precious, because everybody in his, he was one of 7 Rangers that were gunned down by all this cheap lead. And that's how he didn't necessarily say, "I will never kill anybody," but he used silver bullets to remind himself that every time he fires it, life is precious. I thought that's a really good way to just remind himself of the preciousness of human life. And then you have these Lone Ranger comic books in the 2010s where, like, the Lone Ranger is using silver bullets as his calling card. He runs in, he scatters some silver bullets, and he runs off. And it's like, no, I think you missed the point. I think you missed the point of the Lone Ranger.
Oh, that's hilarious. So
it's true. That's what the Dynamite comics. You read them. It's like he's always scattering silver bullets everywhere he goes because that's his calling card.
That's hilarious. Yeah, anyway. I really wish. I mean, I've not read a lot of the Dynamite. That whole line of their Green Hornet and Lone Ranger books. But I just really wish that we had lived in the timeline where Ron Fortier had a chance to write a real Green Hornet Lone Ranger crossover in his version of the continuity. Because I just think that what he did and what he set up with now was just the superior version of the Green Hornet. So
I need to read those.
Yeah. So anyway, well, there's a couple things in the chat I want to go ahead and hit quick, and then we'll probably wrap up the show. Fly Fox said Bill Willingham has Tim Drake comment on Bruce and guns in Robin Days of Fire and Madness. I have not been aware of this story, and I feel I need to seek it out. That sounds awesome. Batman and I work outside the law, so we can never appear in court to justify our use of deadly force. So to reduce the chance of ending up with a corpse on our hands, we avoid the tools which employ deadly force. That's smart. That's smart writing. Something I'd expect from Bill.
Yeah.
Also, Dust Media, who I've got two people I don't think I've seen before, Isaac and Book Dust Media. I don't think I've seen you guys in the chat before. Welcome. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Naji says, I guess this is when I have to remind everybody that Batman is introduced as a literal shadow clone with a sidearm. You don't need to, but you can remind us.
Yeah. Yeah. The Chemical Syndicate was actually a story from the Shadow that they stole. They pretty much swiped it.
Yeah. So not sure that Fly Fox continues. Not sure that completely works for me. But at least it's trying to make sense from a right-wing perspective. Yeah, I think so.
You know, I live 10 miles from Bill Willingham.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I actually took a writing class with him once.
Nice.
Just a one day thing. That was interesting though. I got to hear some good anecdotes.
That's wild. I did not realize that. Isaac says Batman won't use force fields because it's reflected back to their own bullet would injure themselves. Fly says my mother witnessed her sister get shot and die. She still uses guns and taught us how to use them. So for me personally, I've never been able to understand Bruce's supposed version. Personal story: my grandfather was gunned down in 1978 over a land dispute, and because of that, my dad did not teach us about guns. It messed him up. So I have an easy time understanding Bruce's aversion to guns because my father lived that life. So, and I know other people. I've got other family. I know I have friends who have had family who have had tragedies that they've been through in different circumstances, and their reaction is like your mother's reaction, where it's like, well, the best defense is a solid offense. And I understand that entirely as well. That just wasn't my experience. So I was not exposed as a child, and that's something that I learned as an adult. So
I don't know where he lives, Fly Fox, bro. I just know what town he lives in.
Just show up at his door. These came from Arizona.
He actually tried to start a convention here in Rochester.
Oh yeah,
I forget where he did a Fables convention here in Rochester, but it was some years ago before COVID, and yeah, he was up at the con in the cities promoting the con down here. But at the time, I'd never read a Fables book, so I didn't go.
Yeah, I need to catch up on it, but that'd be cool. So I wonder if he ever makes it out to Nebraska.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I think we've caught up with everybody. Isaac, Book Dust, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Fly, I haven't seen you around in a while. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, Andrew, my buddy Andrew from back of the day, was here live. He usually catches on a replay, so that's awesome. Thanks for showing up. We're gonna wrap it hopefully next week, unless terrible weather things happen.
We did 2 hours on one comic book.
We did 2 hours.
I think you can take this long to get through the Constitution.
Yeah, hour and a half. It was an hour and a half. Well, you can spend 6 months studying it, looking at the historical background to it, the whole business. But yeah.
Thanks for talking this over with me.
No,
I read it years ago, and the story. I just wanted to share it with somebody.
This is Andrew said, I knew you before Zing 1. Maybe. Isaac, has been fun. You did not chat too much. You chatted the perfect amount. Okay, guys, we're gonna call it. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully next week, Wonder Woman 4 through 6. We'll just have to see where it goes. And yeah, we'll go with that. So I'm gonna hold off on scheduling out the other. I was hoping to have a whole month of stuff scheduled, but I'm gonna hold off on that until next week. Until we find out more about the storms and the floods and all that stuff. Okay. Anyway, you guys out there, until next time, go read some comics. Have a good one. Yeah, we'll have to definitely fly. I'll have to do it. Bye. Bye.